Okay, short video just addressing a comment. That's a nice comment from David Tongan. Just subscribe to your page, watch a few videos, blah blah blah. I notice you appear to have a round head Colchester lathe, possibly a student. I'm in Australia and have recently acquired an old 60s Student Mark 1, which I think is similar to this one. I'm currently repairing a few issues with worn headstock gears, cross slide nut, etc. Well on the way with it. Anyway, I'm curious as to your appraisal of this lathe and the size of the tool holders you use. I've been using 20 by 20 carbide insert holders packed up with steel packing, or with a steel packing strap. Being very amateur hobbyist with no experience as a machinist, I wonder if you might have advice on a better option for this lathe. Cheers, Dave. Well, not so much advice, but I can show you what I've got on this lathe, which works well for me. Okay, this is it's a Dixon quick set or quick change tool post. The holders are basically sort of half a dovetail on the outside. They slip in. I'm trying to hold the camera and do that at the same time, like so, and the lever pulls in this cam and locks them, and the centre height is set by this nut here, which controls how far down the tool holder drops before you lock it. And if you do a lot of one-off stuff and you want to have 10 of your favourite tools, most commonly used tools, in holders ready set on centre height to go, these are a really good option. It's got 3 sides, and this one is indexable, which is nice because if you've set a partling tool in one of these holders, which is square with the world, once you drop that in, that tool will always be perfectly square. Likewise, boring bars and things, if you've set them up so that they run true in the hole and clear and don't rub or give you any issues, once you re-index that, you can get everything back, which is nice. So I'll just quickly have a look at the interweb, because I wasn't sure which model I had here, but it is, I think, looking at the dimensions of it, it is an S1. No, sorry, the S1. Lathe centre height 114 to 127. 127 is 5 inches. This is a 6-inch centre lathe. 73 inches, and those are the dimensions I've got. So this is a Dixon S1, and somebody has packed it here to get the centre height within range, and it's worked pretty well. Most of these are set well within range for most of the tools that I use. I have had to use packing on some little itty bitty tools that I've ground, but that's not unusual. I keep high-speed steel tool, CNMG carbide. These are on 20mm shank tool holders, which I like. iScar parting tool, really like this one, highly recommend it. Can you see what it is there? Yeah, TGTR 2020-3-10 or something similar. It's never snatched or wibbled or scared me, this one, so I really like that. You can only part off about 2 inches with it, but if you've got tough material, it really works well. It's got these inserts are kind of have a funny shape, but they really work. Doesn't chatter, doesn't bite, doesn't do nasty things. Very pleased with that. Focus, you. Thank you. So what? Yeah, we've got to go the high speed, the CNMG, parting tool. It's usually a DNMG. Another iScar tool I really like. This little boring bar. Don't actually know what this one is. But it's very good. It will go down an inch hole, and it uses these SNMG tips. Again, these tips with a negative rake, you get 8 cutting faces, and I haven't even worn up one on this. I don't know what these iScar ones are. Absolutely awesome, really last well. Appraisal of the lathe. Well, yeah, I've got the cross slide nut backlash issues as well. That's standard for these. You just, whichever way you're cutting, if you're feeding the tool in turning, you just always approach clockwise to your number. If you overshoot, back off and come up clockwise. And if you're boring, you just always approach counterclockwise. If you overshoot your number, back off. And you know, it's just a fact of life. If you don't have backlash eliminators, all machines have backlash. This one has a crazy amount of backlash. Yeah, my headstock gears are noisy. Apparently they are on all Colchesters. I guess if you want to use carbide and turn small parts, the downside of this lathe is the maximum speed of 1000 RPM. That's why I keep some really sharp, honed, high-speed steel bits ground up with a small nose radius, and you can then get a good finish on some of the Terrier steels at low surface speeds. I guess I could fit a 3-phase motor with a, you know, a VFD and push the speed at surface, push the speeds up a bit. I don't think it would hurt anything. I think the headstock bearings would stand it easily. Maybe 1500, 2000 RPM, but I can live with it as it is. It would be noisy because there's straight cut gears in these and they're not the quietest of headstocks. Anyway, that's probably enough of my rambling. It can take a fairly heavy cut. We'll just put a bit of bar in and see what we can achieve, and then I will leave you all in peace. Just before we get started on what this lathe can do, I've said it before, sort of a weak link on a lot of lathes is the compound and the way it leaves the tool hanging a long way away from the bearing surface of the cross slide. You got downward force on the tool here, which tends to want to rock this cross slide thusly. It's not always good. What I tend to do, some people have made lathes with tool posts where they've done away with the compound altogether. The downside of this one is there's no cutaway in the saddle here, so if you want to work close to the chuck, you do need to get the tool out here sometimes. You just have to bear in mind its limitations. What I do when I'm turning heavy stuff and I've got my smaller chucks on that don't hit the saddle, or you know, I haven't got jaws, crazy things in the 4-jaw chuck with jaws hanging out, you just wind this compound as far back as I can get away with, being careful not to crash this part of it into a chuck jaw, as I want to get close to the chuck. And that helps a lot with heavy cuts and with parting. It just makes it less likely to chatter. Okay, just for kicks, you know, I'm going to take a heavy-ish cut here. This nice finish I got, taking about 1/8 of an inch total cut, you know, 60 to 100 type per side, is really happy on 2, 3, 4 inch bar if you get the speed right, and it's got the speed range to handle all that. Now this is was a bit of 2-inch bar. It's down to about 1.75 now, and I'm at 610 RPMs. Just for kicks, I'm going to push it to a 1/4 inch cut. You'll hear the old gears working. finish went off a bit. I probably could have sorted that with a fresh tip on the insert. Maybe this one's getting a bit tired. Handled it with no problem. As I say, I don't normally push it that hard. You can hear the headstock gears working and whining a bit. It's an old machine. I don't want to push it any harder, but it can shift some metal. For a 6-inch centre lathe, it's got no problem. Chip's not breaking quite as hard. Like, I probably could have even caused them to feed up just a fraction. They handled that quite well. The finish wasn't quite as nice as with the slightly lighter cut, but for a 1/4-inch cut for a lathe of this size, that's quite respectable. And you know, if you need to move material, you can. If you're prepared to accept the limitations of 1000 RPM maximum spindle speed, and if you grind some nice sharp high-speed steel bits with a very small nose radius, seems to help. You can turn these steels, these tightly stuffed steels that don't always give a good surface finish, very well at small diameters, you know, and you can do some quite intricate work with it. It's really quite a versatile little machine. I say I'd have to look a long way to find anything equivalent and spend a lot of money to find anything equivalent. If you can find an old Colchester Student Triumph Bantam that hasn't been too abused, they make a pretty sound lathe. They're pretty rigid, you know, with a few limitations. I wouldn't hesitate if that's the sort of thing you want. Anyway, I hope that helps. Thanks very much for watching. Remember to like, share and subscribe. Please, it does help, and comment. Good night.